So we're going to talk about Purim today instead of Ask the Rabbi. That's not me. So we're going to talk about Purim. And I'm going to give you some basic facts of what Purim is, P-U-R-I-M. And then I'm going to take a journey back and talk about Esther. Because without Esther, there would be no Purim. So we need to talk about her and talk about her journey to the king. And so I'm going to basically give you the facts about Purim now. It's the Feast of Esther. It's a time of purification and restoration. It's a celebratory time. We celebrate Purim. So with pretty much everything, where there's a celebration, somewhere in there, there's a fast. So I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. So Purim in Hebrew means lots, L-O-T-S, so the casting of lots. You've read about that in the Bible, where kings and leaders and various men of God have cast lots. And so that is still a practice that happens today, the casting of lots. That still happens. And so basically what this was is the casting of lots for the destruction of the Jews. It happens on the 14th of Adar, A-D-A-R, Adar, the month of Adar. So it commemorates the defeat of Haman. Boo! And so I'll tell you about why we do that. So his plot to destroy the Jews that is recorded in the book of Esther. Yay! So salvation of the Jews is what that was. All right, so just a little sidestep here while I'm saying boo and yay. In our synagogues across the world, when we read the book of Esther and you hear Esther, we all go, yay! You hear Mordecai, yay! King Xerxes, yay! You know, but then when you hear Haman, boo! Because he's the bad guy, right? So it's a lot of fun. That's why I tell you, when we go and we for the service and of Purim, there's a lot of celebrations, a lot of really fun songs and dances. The kids are very involved. They ask everybody in the synagogue to dress in some sort of biblical character. Sometimes Superman and the princesses and all the heroes show up. Not really sure if I'm pretty sure they were not in biblical time, but they show up, and it's fine because it's just a celebratory time. That's all it is the community come together and we celebrate the saving of the Jews. That's what that is. It's all about their lives being saved through the obedience of Esther and how God used King Xerxes as a tool to make that happen with Esther. So, and as well as Mordecai's obedience to bring Esther to the purification process. So if you want to kind of walk along with us to celebrate this, there is the fast of Esther. Esther, in the book of Esther, she actually fasted 3 days. Okay, so that is actually written in the Bible, in the book of Esther, that she fasted for 3 days. She was asking God to deliver the Jews from destruction. Okay, so one of the things that we do, when John and I were youth leaders at a congregation here in Houston, we asked our teenagers to do the 3-day fast, a hard fast, where you were drinking water and that's it. So we're teaching them every time we did a fast, or there was a fast that came along in our traditions and God's appointed times, we asked the youth to fast with us. And so we actually did a 3-day hard fast with them. And to go through sort of their own asking God to help in an area of their life that there needs to be some restoration and purification, those kind of things during that time. But technically, it's only one day, and it's one day that we do. As far as the fast, you could do the fast, and it begins at sundown on the 16th, March 16th, and the fast is over at sundown on the 17th here in the United States. Okay, so the date's a little different. If you want to do it with Israel, then you're going to do the 15th and 16th. If you're doing it with the U.S., it's the 16th and 17th. So those dates are a little bit tricky. And you can Google them as well. It's all out there. You just type up Fast of Esther 2022, and it'll show up. It'll say that it's March 16th for the U.S., and it's March 15th if you're actually in the land of Israel. So anyway, so then Purim begins on the eve of our sundown on March 17th for the U.S. Okay? All right. So, so the fast is a 24-hour day fast. And so basically, I kind of did this already. I jumped ahead. But the book of Esther is called the Megillah. M-E-G-I-L-L-A. M-E-G-I-L-L-A. The whole Megillah. You've heard it? Right. So that's the book of Esther. So, so there's some of the little tricky slangs or sayings that are out there. You're like, I didn't know that. So we refer to reading the whole Megillah. That means we're reading the whole book of Esther.
A Megillah gorilla.
I don't know. Never heard that one before. But so one of the treats that we eat is called Hamatashin. Hamatashen. Hamatashin. And I will tell you, I'm going to give a plug for my favorite bakery is Three Brothers Bakery. My favorite location is the original location. And so, near Stella Link, yes. And it's my favorite place to go. And sometimes the owner, he's there, so it's a neat conversation. Get to see him and stuff. So anyway, they're Hamatashin, so they're shaped. So they're shaped like a triangle. So they go down like this. So and it's a pastry, kind of like a cookie, and it's filled with all kinds of different things. So you can have different kind of jellies, or it can be savory, or it can be sweet. For Purim, we do sweet. And they are delicious. And at Three Brothers, they're really big. And they're not cheap, I'm going to just say. You're not going to go get a dozen for $5.99. That's more like one. So I will tell you, when Belden's was open, we could go to Belden's and get them there. Have not been to the H-E-B in Meyerland yet. I just don't want to park on the bottom floor in a garage. I haven't been there to see it. So I know that they're on their top floor is a kosher bakery, kosher deli, all of that on the top floor. It's a 3-story H-E-B there. I'm pretty sure they have it because it's right, in the Jewish community. So anyway, so but we serve those at Purim, have them in our home, to have the ones that we get from Three Brothers are so big that John and I just cut them right in half and share, or he doesn't. So, we like our sweets. So, but they're really good. And but basically, the Hamatashin is a representation of Haman's ear, or Haman's hat. Sorry, I said his ear. His hat, my bad. What in the world? I have no idea where the word ear came from. I'm so sorry that I caught it. Haman's hat. So anyway, so that's what that's from. And so there you go. When we have Purim and the celebration, Chag Sameach. So that's just happy holiday. Or Purim Sameach. So it's one of those. You know, in Hebrew, everything is, right? So you're clearing your throat. So Chag Sameach, or Purim Sameach, which is Happy Purim. All right, so that's pretty much Purim and the facts, what you need to know about Purim. But what I want to talk to you today is about the journey, that the most significant part of Purim. And this is something that's taught to the children when they go into Shabbat school and when they're taught in their Hebrew school. And they're getting ready for their bar and bat mitzvahs. They're taught about Esther, because Esther is the key component to the Jewish people being rescued because of her obedience. But we have to back up even further than that. That when they were calling for all of the young women to be gathered together for the king to select his bride, to select his one, because Vashti was not, boo, we say boo to Vashti as well, right? Because she was King Xerxes' wife, and she was a horrible person. And so King Xerxes wanted, it was time to select. He had concubines. They all had concubines back then. How they did all that, it's just bizarre to me that they would want all of that hormone there. Yes, I'm a female and I can say that. So, but there was a lot of, that was part of what they did. And so they brought in all of these young women. Understand that these young women in the fields were working. Okay? They didn't walk into that palace looking like beauty had just draped over them. They had calluses on their hands. They had sores on their skin, because are they bathing out there in the desert, out in the mountain fields and taking care of the flock and doing the things that some of these women did? They were roughneck, let me go in here, I can take care of him kind of, that's what they looked like. But because they were outwardly, they had to be purified. So in order to go before the king. So there was the acts of obedience from Mordecai to go find Esther and bring her. Esther to be obedient to her uncle, to say, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, but let's go for this. And so she went in. Of course, I'm simplifying the story. Read the book of Esther. And so there is part of this purification process that has to happen. It could kind of come across as vain, as far as why these women had to be taken from what they looked like out on the field to being the best of their best, everything healed and all of that. So it can come across as sort of vain, for the king to be vain, or for the women, I can't do this because I don't look my best, instead of just trusting God through the process. So part of what's really going on here is that there's more of a deeper inward beautification that is also happening. And with Esther, it was all along growing her relationship with the Lord, with her God, our God, growing and growing deeper. And that relationship of trust, 100% trust that God's got this, that she's just going to be obedient. When she hears this is what God has called her to do, I'm just going to be obedient and know that if God calls me to do this and the king kills me, then the king kills me. But if God's called me to do this and the king's heart is turned, then my people will be saved. Amen. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to go all in. And that's what she did. So one of the things I'm gonna just kind of read a little bit of Esther to you. So it's Esther 2:12. Before a young woman's turn came to go into King Xerxes, she had to complete, are you ready? 12 months of beauty treatment. Wow. Prescribed for women. 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with perfumes and cosmetics. Myrrh, we're going to take a little break here, is part of what they used in the first and second temple, the temple service. And it's part of it. Myrrh comes from, it's called ketoret, Ketoret. And it is absolutely the part that you use and they burn as an incense in the temple service. Okay, so they used it in the first and second temple. Okay, what's in the components of myrrh? So myrrh kills bacteria. It kills parasites. It heals sores. And it also is a emotional balancing component. So it gets into a part of the emotional part of your brain, because we know that there's different parts of our brain that control different things. This actually specifically goes into the emotional part of the brain and creates this calmness. Something to think about. So the myrrh is there, and we're using that. They use that for 6 months. So we're not just saying put a little dabble, do you? Yeah. We're talking about baths in this myrrh, a soaking in this myrrh, because the calluses have to be gone, the hands, the feet, the skin, everything has to be purified and has to be healed. Okay? And so that's what the myrrh is for. And it's pretty neat. When we first studied this, John and I were sitting in a, you guys call them home groups, but Havara is like a home group. And we were sitting in this, and we were studying Esther. We were studying the book of Esther. And they just kind of hopped right over that part. And I went, hold on a minute. 6 months is a long time. So that's when I realized how worn out. They're out in the sun all day. Their skin looks rough. And these women are going to do what they have to do to not be turned away, and their families then shamed. Right? You don't want to be turned away, because then there's shame in your family that the king has rejected you. So you're either going to be his companion or you're going to hope to be his concubine. Okay? So that's the first 6 months. That's a lot for anybody, male, female. That's a long time that's your 100% focus every single day. And then 6 months of the beautification process. So you've now healed everything. The scabs are gone. The calluses are gone. Now we need to soften and beautify and pure. So that's where the frankincense came in. And the other oils that were all part of their beautification process. So the perfumes, and if you put frankincense and myrrh together, it smells great. Try separating them. It's not so great. Really? So you put them together, so that's when you've got the frankincense and myrrh, part of that last 6 months. We're going to continue this healing, can continue this, and this calming effect that's going forward, but we're going to add it to frankincense for the perfume aspect of it. So so that's kind of where those things are. The value of myrrh was so high in those days that it was extremely expensive. So your common people that live, outside the king's palace didn't have access to this except for in the temple services. Okay? So imagine how much of this oil they had for all of these women, these young women, to be brought in and to bathe in this every day and to be treated. So it's, for me, it's just kind of mind-blowing in how that works. So I don't stick to my notes completely, so sorry. I just want to be sure I don't miss anything. The whole it's mandatory for the wholeness of the outward as well as the inward. Because Esther chapter 2, verse 7 says that she would be a lovely figure and was beautiful. So she was lovely and beautiful. Okay? So this is repeated over and over. Those two words together, lovely and beautiful. Lovely is not necessarily an outward thing. So that's how God's going to use her disposition to win the king. We know that she was bold. So she was given favor with men who were in charge of it's a harem. Of where all the women were. So Esther 2 verses 8 through 9. Esther also was taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Haggai, who had charge over them. She pleased him and won his favor. Immediately, he provided her with the beauty treatments and special foods. Now, she's Jewish. What are the special foods? She was allowed to keep kosher. She was she kept what the dietary laws were that they followed in her community and with the Jewish people. And moved her and her attendants to the best place. So she won favor from the get-go. She came in and won favor. This is a disposition that God put inside of her that allowed her to win favor. We read further that she won favor with everyone she met. So she couldn't have not been lovely. She had to have been lovely. The inner beauty showed up on the outside through the purification and the beatification process. That was Esther 2:15. Then in Esther 2:17, when she finally had her turn, right? Because everybody had gone in and now it's her turn. And possibly, and we don't really know if she only got one shot. But we're saying, the tradition is she really just had one shot to do this. She went into the king, and we read that the king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the other maidens, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. But God. And not without God. Right? It was the beauty of who she was, not what she looked like, that won favor. And when it says that she was lovely and beautiful, that it's a mixture of both. Because then the inner beauty, she may have been we understand that she was beautiful, but she's so much more beautiful because of the love of the Lord that's coming out of her. Her love for God, and her acts of obedience and her faith in God. It was her whole being. She was refreshingly honest. So if you read the book of Esther, you're going to see that honesty roll right out of her face. And you think, why didn't he just cut her head off right then? She was graceful, and she was not self-seeking. More importantly, she was a woman of God, and his scent, Elohim's scent, was on her and dwelled everywhere she went. She was the epitome of the Proverbs 31 woman. So if you've never read Proverbs 31 from that standpoint, go back and read it from the standpoint of thinking about the woman of God, the women of God that God pulled out and called his own. If she had not gone and been immediately obedient in the beginning, she could not have been the one to save the lives of the Jewish people. So God had taken her through that purification process only because she allowed him permission. Now, what was her permission? She said, yes, I will go. She gave God permission because she said, yes, you say go, I will go. Even if unto my death, I will go. Because it's dangerous going before the king in a certain way. So that's through the process. And if you read more of Esther, and we won't take the time to read the whole Megillah today, but do that and read through. And now that you have an understanding of a different view, maybe not necessarily a new understanding, but maybe a different view of the book of Esther and how all of that had to happen before she could go before the king. It may bless you and cause you to say to yourself, where in my life does God need to purify? Does God need to sanctify? Where do I need to be more obedient to God and just say, okay, you asked me to do this, I'm going. So, but that's, the book of Esther is it's fun to experience. You know, there's lots of movies out there, the King and I, and all different kinds of things that kind of take the idea of Esther and the king. And so there's all different kinds of things. There is a movie that's about Esther that's out there. Of course, it's Hollywood, right? We know that they take things and twist and whatever, but the book of Esther is such a fun book to read and to celebrate. And it's also encouraging that he took this young woman because she said yes, and she was obedient to her uncle. And she was out in the fields. She was this person out here tending flocks. And that she came in and God used her to be the new queen and to save his people, her people. And all because she said, send me, I'll go.
The difference between Vashti and her was their obedience. They were
Absolutely.
probably both beautiful.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. But the difference is Vashti said no. And she got
Well, and Vashti was very self-seeking. Yeah, and she was absolutely not lovely. She was the epitome of arrogance. And she was definitely that person who angered the king. So one of the things to know is that you had to be called to go before the king. And if you went before the king before being called to be before him, you're pretty much dead. He could order your head, put to death immediately. Esther bombarded. She went straight in with boldness and said, if I die, I die. And she went in, and the king stopped the guards. He stopped her demise because of who she had already been to him prior to that. And he found her lovely then. And so he was like, okay, if she's coming before me in this boldness and knows that I could order her dead immediately, there must be something else happening here that I need to listen to. So may we all be able to be that bold in our walk. Absolutely. So, but that's the lesson today for Purim, and so that's it. Yes.
What is myrrh? Is it a plant? Where does myrrh come from?
So it's part of the component of that what they use. So it's from what my research has been that it comes from Ketoret, Ketoret. It comes from that. So Ketoret is used in the temple service as an incense. So it has to be plant-based because it's got to come up. So myrrh is pulled from it.
I thought it was sap from a tree or something. No?
Ketoret?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Myrrh is.
Myrrh, it comes
Myrrh
from
is-
that. So
is
myrrh
myrrh.
is the oil.
Okay.
So is it one element or is myrrh a mixture of, a blend, yeah, a blend?
That I don't know.
Well, you collect.
I have no idea about that. That's a good question. I have not even, I didn't even ask that question of myself, so that's a good question. Yes. Oh, you've got myrrh with you? Is that just myrrh?
No, frankincense.
Okay, so if you smell it, so has anybody not smelled frankincense and myrrh together? You've not smelled it together? Okay, Miss Joe has a bottle of it instead of us passing it around. Miss Joe has a bottle of it if you want to smell frankincense and myrrh together. It's a beautiful smell. The fragrance is absolutely amazing. There's two people. There's two people. So they'll come to you instead of passing it around. So, but myrrh, I will tell you, the two of them apart, it's harsh. So, I mean, you sit in a bath of myrrh to be cleansed, I'm just saying, it's a harsh smell. Yeah, it pulls it right on out, right? So imagine all of those impurities coming out while you're bathing in that. I'm just saying, it's nowhere near that I haven't read that they dump it and start all over every day. But I can imagine them redoing this every day, right? Getting in the
It would be
same.
water and then they add?
Have no idea. That's never been. So that I don't know. So
Was that the incense that they buried, that they washed Jesus' feet?
frankincense.
And myrrh?
It was a combination of the
They
two.
would do that for the body,
Right.
so it wouldn't smell so bad.
Right. Because of the purification process of myrrh, and then you've got frankincense that covers up. So,
And they said it was such a large amount when she
yeah,
cleaned his feet that it permeated
Right.
everywhere around it.
absolutely. So even the use of the oil throughout when you're reading through the Word, and you're reading through and you think about these, go back to the beginning. Were any of these used in temple services? And so asking why, what was it used for? And, so that's just questions that make you kind of go, And then now you're studying this portion of it. And so,
And the wise man brought frankincense and myrrh.
right? Sure did. So you think about that with the purification process of a newborn.
But weren't they separate?
Yes.
And that, yes,
They weren't,
yes.
they weren't joined together.
Right. That's a modern. Frankincense and myrrh is more, I think, more of a modern thing. Because they use frankincense as far as the beautification, the smoothness, and the oiliness of it.
Yeah, my sister brought this from Israel,
Mm-hmm.
and it's for anointing oil. And I'm telling you, when you've been anointed with that, you smell it for days. You
You
can take a bath, and
Yeah.
you smell it for days.
It's
Isn't
a
that
sweet
wonderful?
fragrance.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah. To
absolutely.
remember
remind
that,
you,
to
to
remember that.
remind you.